A white blaze begins spreading across the windows, not from fire inside the spacecraft, from the air outside. At lunar return speeds, the atmosphere stops behaving like air. It becomes the impact. A shell of plasma forms around Orion. For a moment, the heat shield is doing exactly what it was built to do. It is destroying itself. And the crew survives only if that destruction continues. The protection works only because it is being destroyed first. Outside, compressed air is reaching temperatures that would overwhelm metal structures and human bodies in seconds. The glow continues wrapping around Orion as it plunges lower. The atmosphere is no longer something Orion is moving through. It is something Orion is hitting. The glow begins to break apart. Dark gaps appear around the capsule, small at first, then wider. The white shell that had been wrapped around Orion starts thinning away, and for a moment, it looks as if the spacecraft is finally leaving the worst of the heat behind. It isn't. The capsule is climbing slightly, not away from Earth, away from the thickest layer of atmosphere it has encountered so far. The violence outside eases just enough to feel different. Inside, that difference matters. A sudden increase in force can be endured. An endless one becomes something else. Bodies feel it. Guidance systems feel it. Every second spent inside peak heating continues to consume the margin the mission depends on. NASA designed Orion for this moment. The spacecraft does not fall straight home from the moon. It performs a skip entry, grazing the atmosphere before diving back into it. The path is longer. The timing becomes more important. For a brief stretch, the fire recedes. Then the capsule begins descending again. The dark gaps vanish. Light races across the surface. The plasma returns, brighter than before. What looked like an escape was only the space between two burns. The atmosphere is too wide to crash through all at once. Orion has to scrape across it, climb, and strike it again. Now the heat shield faces something new. Not a single encounter. A second one. And if the angle is even slightly wrong, the extra exposure does not stay outside the spacecraft. It starts turning guidance, timing, and survival into the same problem. Black fragments begin streaming away from the surface. Not metal. Not pieces of the spacecraft. The heat shield is shedding itself into the flow. Against the white plasma, the material looks almost weightless. Small dark flakes separate from the outer layer and disappear behind Orion. The surface underneath turns darker as it chars, rougher, less like a finished machine and more like something being consumed. That is exactly what NASA expects to see. The shield is facing temperatures approaching 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It cannot simply block that heat. It has to carry part of it away. For a while, the process feels understandable. A few inches of material stand between lunar return speeds and a cabin filled with breathable air. The shield survives by disappearing. But the balance is narrow. If too little material breaks away, heat begins staying where it should not. If too much leaves too quickly, protection starts thinning before the descent is over. Nothing about it looks intact. And that is the reassuring part. As long as the destruction remains controlled, the shield is doing its job. The concern is no longer whether it is burning. The concern is whether it keeps burning the way engineers predicted. The burn keeps moving. For several seconds, nothing appears unusual. The plasma remains attached to the capsule. Material continues peeling away. The descent continues exactly as planned. Then one section grows brighter. Not the entire shield. One edge. A narrow region begins collecting more light than the rest, as if part of the flow has decided to stay there. The difference is subtle, easy to miss, but it keeps following the spacecraft as Orion races deeper into the atmosphere. The burn is not even, but the capsule cannot stop to check the answer. The bright region remains. Heat that spreads across a surface can be managed. Heat that begins concentrating becomes something harder to predict. A shield can be performing correctly overall, while one location absorbs a larger share of the punishment. That possibility follows Orion second by second. Inside the cabin, the crew remains protected. Outside, the surface keeps changing. Charred material leaves, fresh material appears. The flow reorganizes itself again. The brighter edge is still there. Not dramatically. Just enough to matter. If a weak point develops, there is no inspection, no repair, no correction. The spacecraft is already committed to the corridor that will either carry the crew into survivable air or continue testing the shield 1 second at a time. The brighter edge finally begins to fade. Not because the atmosphere has become gentle, because Orion is leaving the worst of it behind. From a distance, the spacecraft no longer looks trapped inside a star. The plasma trail thins. Orange turns darker. The violent glow that dominated the descent starts falling away into the air above. What remains is the capsule itself. Blackened, scarred, still falling. The danger disappears visually before the evidence disappears physically. The return from the moon carries far more energy than a return from low Earth orbit. Engineers can design for the heating, but none of that makes the corridor wider. The window is narrow. The same descent keeps moving toward a different outcome. Inside the cabin, survival now depends on what remains after the burn. The structure must stay sealed. Cooling systems must keep working. The vehicle must remain exactly what it was before the atmosphere tried to tear energy out of it. Below, Earth looks calm. Clouds. Ocean. Dark land. Nothing about the view suggests what happened a few minutes earlier. Yet the capsule carries the proof. A blackened spacecraft falls beneath the last traces of orange glow, still inside the only path that could bring its crew home. The environment never surrendered control. It simply allowed passage through a very small opening.